Here, Big 550 KTRS. The editorial page, stltoday.com, has an interesting story about Steve Stenger and the man who is in charge of the editorial page. The St. Louis Post-Dispatch editorial page editor, Tony Messenger, joins us. Good morning, Tony Messenger. Good to have you back.
Morning, McGraw. Morning, Kelly.
Good morning.
Let's talk a little Steve Stenger. Kind of a scathing editorial about him deciding to no longer participate and be on the board of Better Together.
Well, you know, the problem with the decision that we had was twofold. First of all, he tried to throw the organization under the bus by saying that they didn't inform him of his ex officio status on the board. The previous county executive was also on that board. The county executive, by virtue of the elected position, is on all sorts of similar boards. And one, the organization did inform him. Two, he had been sending representatives to the meeting. So why, come up with some sort of strange, left turn to say, oh, they never told me. That just doesn't make any sense. And secondly, he basically throws cold water on the idea of merger, of consolidation, of all of the very important municipal court reforms and the things that are driving this community's discussion right now. I mean, this is the future of the St. Louis region. He's the county executive, and he's a few months into his reign, and he doesn't want to be involved in the most important conversation going on under his watch. It's just really, really bad leadership. And I don't care if he disagrees with if he disagrees with the facts that are coming out of the Better Together studies, fine. If he disagrees with what the editorial page has been advocating for in terms of unifying St. Louis, fine. But you're the county executive. You should be part of that conversation. And the way you're part of that conversation is to be involved in these organizations that want you to be involved.
You point out in the editorial at stltoday.com, go to the opinion tab, that Civic Progress, the St. Louis Regional Chamber, they're all these ones who are sort of starting this conversation. And I think your point is the county executive has to have an opinion, has to bring something to the table. And so if he's not there, his voice isn't being heard, both either positive or negative.
Right, and this is what was really silly about the answers that he gave as to why he stepped off the board. He said, well, they didn't let me know, but all these other organizations like Civic Progress and the Chamber of Commerce, they did a really good job of letting me know that I'm on their board and I'm going to stay on their board. And what the editorial points out is that those organizations, specifically Civic Progress and the Chamber of Commerce, not only are their executive directors and CEOs on the same Better Together board that he was on, but they support the concepts of regionalization that are driving this very important conversation about our region and our city's future. And so he's basically saying to those other boards that he sits on, well, I don't agree with you either, but I'm going to try to use you to give credibility to why I'm stepping off. And in fact, it destroys his credibility because those organizations sit on the Better Together board because they know that that's where the discussion is going. And if I can, here's the other thing that Mr. Stenger has to understand about leadership. As you know, McGraw, because we've talked about this and I've written about it over and over again, I've got no love lost for Rex Singfeld, whose staffers and money are very much involved in Better Together. I've written thousands and thousands of words about how I believe that some of his efforts and the efforts of some of his staff members in the political world, specifically in the Republican Party, are really bad for Missouri politics, are really bad for the middle class and for poor people, and there is absolutely no love lost there. But here's the deal. He's right on Better Together. And grown-ups in the political system have to get beyond various personal or professional differences to occasionally work together for the greater good. This political world that we've gotten in that is so polarized has made it very hard for people of disparate philosophies to work together. And just saying, I'm not going to be involved in that because maybe some of my lawyer buddies didn't like the Sunday story on the front of the Post-Dispatch, that's just silly. And Steve Stinger's the county executive, and if he's going to be the county executive for much longer, he's going to have to learn to live in that grown-up world.
Tony, I took it as, or at least one of the thoughts that I thought about when I first heard that story, is that that's how little support there is for any type of merger, for any type of consolidation. Because of what happened in Ferguson and because of the lay of the land, maybe Stenger is saying to himself, or reading the tea leaves and saying, there's so little support, why do I want to be associated with this better together? Politically, it's better for me to avoid that and sort of avoid that fight. So
if that's what he's saying, as I point out in the editorial with one example, that I think he's reading the tea leaves wrong. There's a person named Christopher Hannes, and I don't know him personally, but he was a supporter of Steve Stenger. He voted for Steve Stenger. He gave Steve Stenger money in his campaign, and he wrote him a pretty strong letter this week after hearing of him stepping down from Better Together, saying, "Wait a minute, you have to pay attention to what's going on in Acton, where they both grew up, and in Crestwood, and in the rest of St. Louis County. The county needs this discussion about unification. It needs it really badly. It needs it economically. The CEOs of all the major companies in this city and this county know that this conversation has to take place. And eventually all of their employees, who are my neighbors commuting from West County, are going to know about how important this discussion is." And I had an interesting discussion last night with a friend of mine from church who is very conservative, who runs a real estate business. He manages apartment complexes, both that he owns and for others. And he was talking about how the fees on all the different municipalities that he deals with properties on and the occupancy permits, they're all different, and all the rules are different. And it's really a hassle for him in terms of his business. And here's the thing that I told him, and that was involved in this conversation of a group of us. Those fees are going to go up because municipal court reform is going to happen. And those little cities that shouldn't even exist as cities, who need money to operate police departments who aren't as good or professional as the city police department or the county police department, they need to find money from elsewhere. So where are they going to get it? They're going to get it from my friend, the real estate guy, because they got to raise their fees somewhere because they're just trying to exist. The people that are trying to hold on to the status quo are those people connected to municipal governments or traffic attorneys, and that's it. And those seems to be the people that Steve Stenger is talking to. And I guarantee you that the conversation is changing in this city and this county, and he's going to be on the wrong side if that's what he thinks. This is not the old merger conversation from 5 to 10 years ago. It's changing, and it's changing every day.
Tony, while we still have you, STLtoday.com opinion tab for all of the editorials, including this one on Steve Stenger. What do you think of Nixon coming to town and dropping the little nugget that the St. Louis County does not have to be involved in financing of a brand new stadium?
I haven't quite figured that one out yet. I don't know if that is yet another example of Steve Stenger not being ready for prime time in terms of just not knowing how to communicate with the governor's office and trying to move this thing forward, or if part of it is just the smoke and mirrors of trying to convince the NFL that we have a viable stadium proposal. I mean, I actually agree with Steve Stinger's stated position to the point that I understand it, that for the county to be involved and for the city to be involved, I believe there should be a vote. Whether it's a vote of the alderman or the county council, or whether it's a vote of the public, I don't believe we should be committing any future new revenue to a stadium project without a vote of the people or a vote of their elected representatives. So to that extent, I think Steve's probably right if that's his position. But I don't understand why the way that came down tells me that there is some dispute between the governor's office and the county executive's office, and that's not a good sign either.
Yeah. Lastly, as a lifelong Denver Broncos fan and being on the editorial page of the hometown newspaper, do you have a problem if the Broncos were to move to St. Louis?
Well, now you're just smoking some of that weed that I'm trying to legalize in the state of Missouri. That is not going to happen. The Denver Broncos are staying in Denver, where they will celebrate next year's Super Bowl championship, and Peyton Manning will go out on top. Let's just not be crazy.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's the man who controls the editorial page of our local hometown newspaper. Tony, thanks for checking in. Be safe.
Thanks for having me.
You got
Talk to you later.
it. 8:32 here, Big 550 KTRS.
Are you